Well, we are live. Cory Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm, voice of college football here. It's going to be a fun show, isn't it, everybody? As you can see from our banner here, I think this sums up things pretty well. Listen, I'm going to take some time here as we wait for Don Patterson to join the show to open up the call lines. All right. You're welcome to call in, sound off. All right. And speak your mind. I'm going to try to say, well, less than I normally would because I obviously, you can imagine I had a lot to say during the game. And certainly as I have time to kind of process this game and what happened, I'll have more to say. And certainly when Don joins us, he'll have some insightful words for us. But I want to leave this open to everybody. The phone number is at the bottom of your screen, 860-499-3332. 860-499-3332. Iowa gets destroyed, and I don't think that's being hyperbolic. Final score 24-7. And in case you expected anything less than a stellar performance from David Bell, you did not get that. Iowa struggled to contain who I think is the best wide receiver in the league. Now, I'm biased because as an Iowa guy, I've continued, as everyone here listening has, if you're an Iowa fan, you've continued to see Bell burn Iowa cornerbacks year after year after year, literally. And as great as Phil Parker is, okay, I'm not going to sit here and trash Phil. He has not gotten it done against Purdue. That's the bottom line. Brian Ferentz has not gotten it done against Purdue. Kirk Ferentz has not gotten it done against Purdue. All right, these are not grandiose statements. All right, this is legitimate. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm also not going to trash these guys. But the bottom line is, this was a really, really surprising, but also just I don't want to use hyperbolic language. This is one game, but this was a really bad day. I don't know how else to say it without using terms that I'm going to regret later. Okay. This was about as bad as any Iowa fans could have imagined this game to go. I don't know that I don't know the last time where, as Iowa fans, we've felt more let down than in this moment. I'm trying to think. I mean, Iowa's lost heartbreaking games, but when's the last time Iowa has been rolling? I mean, 6-0. You're heading into this game coming off a win against Penn State. I know there was some controversy about that, which I will not talk about today. If anybody wants to call in and talk about it, you can talk about it. I'm not going to partake in that. I think I spent too much time talking about the Penn State stuff this week. I don't think the Iowa players, I don't think that was a distraction. I don't think the Iowa players spent any time talking about, the Sean Clifford stuff and the injury stuff. So that's behind us. But certainly this was just a beatdown. I mean, it was just a beatdown. There is no other way to describe this. It was a total beatdown by Jeff Brohm, who obviously knows how to scheme against Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker. Again, I love Phil. I've been very outspoken. I think, and this is hard to say in a day like this, right? Because we don't want to make any, we don't want to anoint anybody that was on that sideline today for Iowa. But I would if you ask me today, who do I want to be the next head coach at Iowa? It would either be Bob Stoops or Phil Parker. I think Phil Parker is deserving. He had a bad day, a really, really bad day. And he's had bad days each of the last, well, what is that now? 4 of the last 5 games against Purdue. And last year was kind of a weird game. I mean, of course, it was basically the same personnel. Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, David Bell, King Doru was out in that game, but it was basically the same story. Iowa did lose the penalty battle in that game. I don't know what the final count today was on penalties. Certainly turnovers didn't help, but this was just an all-around beatdown. They did not lose this game. Iowa did not lose this game because of one thing, all right? People want to attack Brian. He was bad today. People want to attack Spencer. He was bad today. People want to attack Matt Hankins. He was bad today. There was not a single position on this field that played well today. Caleb Shudak missed a kick from like 26 yards. This was just an all-around throwaway performance. And I'm not saying I'll be anxious to get Don Patterson's opinion on this when he comes on the show here in a little bit. Coach Don Patterson will join us. But I almost wonder if this is one of those games where if you're Kirk Ferentz, you just tell your guys, hey, look, we got a bye week. Go home. Don't think about football. Just go home and try to enjoy yourselves. And we're going to basically just throw this game out the window. I mean, I don't know how you look at tape from this game. I mean, again, I'm no coach, but I don't know how you look at tape from this game because everything failed in this game. And maybe that's hyperbolic. We did see 2 late returns. We saw a return on a kickoff from Ivory Kelly-Martin and a good return from Charlie Jones in punt return. So, but again, overall, this is just a really, really bad day to be a Hawkeye. I've never seen Kinnick Stadium cleared out that early. And I can't believe I'm saying that, given the fact that as of right now, Iowa is ranked number 2 in the country. Overrated? Probably. Most likely, right? Were they deserving of that ranking? Probably. 6-0, wins at Iowa State, win at home against Penn State. Don't care about the outside garbage, the narratives. A win at home against an Indiana team that was considered to be a top 20 team heading into the season. Again, that's very much debatable now. But, probably deserving of being number 2 in the country. I just can't believe the crowd was just gone. They were just gone. And I'll be anxious to get Don Patterson's take on this. Don was actually in the press box today. He had some, I don't want to go into detail because that's his business, but he did have some a procedure, I should say that this week. I don't think he'll mind if I divulge that. He had a procedure at the University of Iowa this week. And so for his health, he was in the press box today. So he wasn't able to be out in the crowd, which is probably fine with him in hindsight. But I'll be anxious to hear from him as to when the majority of this crowd was gone. Because, man, when that clock hit 0 and Jeff Brohm was being interviewed by ESPN, I mean, it looked like a spring game. I was just, again, clearly Iowa was done about, 2 or 3 minutes into the fourth quarter. But, man alive. So, again, our number here, let's pop it up in big letters in case you have a headache and you can't squint your eyes, which is me right now. 860-499-3332. 860-499-3332. The more you talk, the less I have to talk. And again, I can't deal with Penn State fans today. So if people come on here to troll all you want, you're not going to get your comments up here. I'm not going to partake. So I can't deal with it today. So, I've admitted myself. I think I spent too much time talking about the Penn State game this week. Again, I'm not saying that a lot of the media did that, right? And I'm not saying Iowa players read into that, but certainly, I think I regret spending as much time talking about it because it was a waste of time. All right, let's take our first call here. Voice of College Football. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame, Voice of College Football. Who do we have on the line?
Oh, hello. It's me, Roberto. I guess I'm the first one.
Hey, Roberto. How are you?
Good. Well, I did warn you about better quarterback play and go towards the championship, right? Last week. I don't know what happened.
You don't know
not
what
only
happened?
That, No, I don't know what happened today. Like, not only Iowa just lost, it's like Purdue's receiver, David Bell, outgained the entire offense of Iowa.
Yeah.
Outgained.
This is what they do. They've been doing it for 3 straight years with Bell.
3 straight years?
I mean, the kid had 200. He had 195 yards. Was it last year or the year before against Iowa? This defense has no answers for David Bell. They have no answers for Jeff Brohm. And we're going on 4 years of that now. Even in the win, I think it was a win. Well, didn't they beat Purdue in 2019 and they gave up 195 yards and 13 catches to David Bell.
Wow.
Roberto, you're not an Iowa fan, are you?
No, I'm an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the quarterback play is one of the many storylines. Obviously, comparing him to a guy like C.J. Stroud, you're probably looking at bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten right now, as opposed to probably the best quarterback in the Big Ten in Stroud. And obviously, we're talking apples and oranges as far as recruiting is concerned. But we were just talking before we went on. My brother and I were actually having this conversation, and we were talking about the idea of, say we just threw this game out, and I know you can't do that. And the reality is Iowa will probably lose more games because they're probably not as good as they were. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you just think about throwing this game out, theoretically, say Iowa comes back, beats Wisconsin, they beat Minnesota, they beat Northwestern, they win out, they 11-1. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think it's very unlikely, but it's possible. They do that. They play Ohio State in the playoff. I don't want to watch that game right now. Like, I don't know any Iowa fan who wants to watch that game, but I don't know that Iowa, if they can't keep David Bell under, what did he have, like 250 yards receiving? And what are they going to do with Olave and all these guys Ohio State throws at you?
Yeah, I'm like more disappointed on the defense this game. Like, how do you let one guy beat you and outgame your team's entire offense? One guy. Well, and then you mentioned this happening for 3 years now.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
I would have imagined how hard it would have been covering him and Rondale Moore.
Well, and thankfully Iowa caught a break because last year Rondale Moore was out that first game.
Oh my.
Yeah, and they still lost on the road and gave up over 120 yards to David Bell. David Bell's stats, and we'll get this up on the screen: 11 catches on 12 targets, 240 yards, an average of 22 per catch with a long of 60.
Longest, that big one. I don't know, was that on the screen? Oh no, on the deep ball. He was like,
I don't.
And making every
no, it was the over the shoulder throw over Hankins. It was the over shoulder throw. Anything else, Roberto?
I don't know. Well, I guess nothing else. I mean,
okay.
Once again, throughout the day, once again, Texas disappointed and everything.
Yes, I did see Texas lose. I was obviously rooting for Texas to win that game and knock off another undefeated team, but now doesn't matter if you're an Iowa fan. Certainly matters as an Ohio State fan. But yeah, you're right. Texas does not look good right now.
And my ex-university, which is University of Cincinnati, just won big against UCF.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And they're probably going to win out. Roberto, I got a couple other callers here, so I'm going to let you go. Appreciate you calling, and feel free to call in later.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
I hope you bounce back at Patterson.
Appreciate that. We got a bye week here. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. My bad. All right. Goodbye.
It's all right. We appreciate Roberto calling in. All right. Moving down the caller queue here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame, voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
This is Blake. I'm in Arkansas.
Hi, Blake.
There's a couple things that we could talk about, obviously, but one of them that was on my mind that I was asking myself even since the Maryland game was, how much do you think it would cost to like buy a player off for them to throw a game? I don't know if that's something you want to discuss here, but like, I get.
Are you talking? Are you insinuating something about Matt Hankins?
No, not him. Not him per se.
Okay. I have no idea. I guess where are you going with this?
Well, the Maryland quarterback
okay,
did not perform very well, and I was having second thoughts about the validity of that game mid first quarter, into the first quarter. And I don't know, this game just it kind of smells to me. The defense really didn't play that bad.
Well, it smells, yeah, it definitely smells. I agree with you. It smells bad.
Considering how long Purdue had the ball and how devastating it must have been for them to sit there and look at the Iowa offensive performance. And, you know, it's almost like a perfect setup. You know, Purdue's kind of had our number in the past. it just doesn't. Something doesn't sound right. Doesn't feel right. Didn't look right.
Let's just clear something up here. I get what you're saying. Are you a Hawkeye fan?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, caller. Here's the deal. College football is a weird game. It's very much like college basketball is, but probably even more so. It's a game of matchups, and there's no question. I'm not going to make excuses for this squad, but this was a bad matchup. I think Maryland, on the other hand, is obviously a good matchup for Iowa. You've got a short quarterback who's limited with his ability to, I think, throw into a zone. I mean, you saw Aiden O'Connell. We've seen David Blau do it. We've seen Aiden O'Connell do it. Whoever the kid before Sindelar did it. Brohm's quarterbacks know how to pick apart this Iowa zone. So I think I would not jump to concluding that there is some vendetta or somebody's throwing games to explain why Iowa performed so well earlier this season. I mean,
that one game just stuck out in my mind because of how poorly he did play.
I get what you're saying, but let's remember Maryland also got destroyed the next week by Ohio State. And I know Iowa and Ohio State are on the same level.
That's sort of to be expected.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that Maryland team is not nearly as good as we thought. And that was week 5? So it's still early. They played Kent State, and they really hadn't played a tough schedule minus West Virginia, who's borderline top 25. So I would not jump to that conclusion. I get your frustration, though. And I thought you were referring to somebody throwing this game, but this is just a matter of David Bell just being a mismatch.
Yeah, no, I am insinuating that about this game. And let me be clear about this. What I'm saying is dispassionate. I'm not angry about the game at all. I mean, I know these kind of things happen. It's just a sport. The game didn't look right.
I agree. It didn't look right. Yeah. Well, who would have thrown the game, caller? A player or a coach?
A player.
I mean, which player? This was the whole team. Nobody played well. Was it the whole team that threw the game?
If we had an average offensive performance, let's just say we played like we did at Penn State, right? Penn State has a good defense. If we just played that well, we win this game.
Okay, but they gave up 240 yards to David Bell. I mean,
I understand that, and despite that, they still put up 24 points.
I get it, but I don't agree. Listen, I get what you're saying, but the defense. Listen, let's remember too. Purdue got very conservative in that fourth quarter. They could have easily had a lot more than 24 points.
Yeah, that last 7 minutes, they kind of laid on it a little bit.
No, the defense sucked. So I wouldn't. And Petrus looked like Petrus of last year. This isn't a matter of anybody throwing the game or money being thrown on the table. I see a comment in the chat about NIL money. This was just a matter of a team that matches up very well against Iowa, and obviously a coach who knows how to scheme against this 4-3 defense, and specifically Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz. And there's no question, Iowa was overrated. I mean, you got to admit that now. Iowa was overrated. I'm not saying it's panic time. Obviously, you're on the edge of that because you lose at home 24-7 as the number 2 team in the country to an unranked Purdue team. There's concern, but I just wouldn't go there. I understand your frustration, though, caller.
Yeah, and again, I'm not frustrated at the game, in what I'm saying, but things happen. I get that. It just didn't look right.
Well.
But anyway.
All right, man. I appreciate the call. And, again, we'll talk about this with Don, but as bad as this was, it's one game. It's one game.
I did see, and I'll expand on what you just said about the defense. When the receivers caught the ball, they're excellent route runners. That's obvious. But when the receivers caught the ball, there wasn't a defender within 4 yards of them.
You're right.
It was really bad. Like we didn't even have a chance to make the tackle on the spot. I would be curious to see what the yards after catch were. Maybe that's something that Don could put out there for the fans.
No, you're
right. Rub it in.
It was something disgusting. I absolutely agree with you.
All right. Have a good evening.
All right, man. Appreciate the call. All right. Driving along here. Heading to our next caller. We do have one line open. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who do we have on the line?
Oh, this is James.
Hey, James.
Hello. I have 4 generations of Iowa grads in my family.
Okay.
The oldest class being 1925. So Iowa's been breaking my family's heart for many years.
Okay.
I just want to say Christian McCaffrey is better than David Bell. Thank you.
Okay. Well, they both burned Iowa. Christian McCaffrey burned Iowa for I don't know how many all-purpose yards, and David Bell has burned Iowa for probably just as many over the course of 3 games. So I would agree with that, and let's go on to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who is on the line?
Hello?
Hello. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame.
Hey, Cory, this is Scott. How you doing?
Scott, how are you? I'm not doing too well. What about you?
Well, listen, it's college football, right?
That's right.
And, the whole football team was not in tune with what was going on. The defense was playing too soft. It showed the inexperience of our offensive line, as people saw. And I don't think Iowa was overrated, Cory. I just think that it was not Iowa's day. I go back to last week's game when Alabama got beat by Texas A&M. Who saw that coming? I just think that Iowa was I don't want to say that they were exhausted from last week's game against Penn State, but I just think that it was just Purdue's day. Unfortunately, Iowa was on the wrong end of the stick. And I just don't get me wrong. Petrus could have done a hell of a lot better, throwing 3 or 4 interceptions, unacceptable. I think Brian Ferentz did not call a good offensive game. I don't think Phil Parker is to blame. I just think the defense should have played. How about man to man? They were playing way too soft for what was going on, Cory. And that's my view of it. Again, it's college football. What are you going to do?
Well, let me challenge you on something.
Sure.
And you're welcome to disagree with me on this, but to say that Iowa was not overrated, I mean, come on now.
Cory, come on now. I mean, we were playing. Look, we took down Indiana. We took down
Indiana sucks.
Indiana took down Penn State.
Oh, I agree with you. The resume was good enough to be ranked number 2. But if we're talking about, if we're going into this game saying that Iowa is the second best team in the country, that's clearly not the truth. And I think most people understood that going into this game. We wanted to convince ourselves that we were wrong and that Iowa somehow was deserving. They were deserving if you look at resume, but clearly they were overrated. I mean, come on.
Cory, I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that. The way our defense was playing, it was just, I don't know what. Let's come down to this. Purdue and Jeff Brohm, for some reason, how many teams play 3 quarterbacks?
Well, you're right.
Mean, come on. Who
yes.
3 quarterbacks?
But they don't do that. They have not done that. They have not done that this year. I don't know that third quarterback has had a single snap. Maybe he's had snaps this year. I don't know. But all I know is that is Brohm at his finest. So sitting here watching this game, I'm saying, look, that's Brohm just scheming up against Ferentz. That's all that is.
You're exactly right. But how many games do you think Brohm and Purdue are going to win after this game? Honestly, I give them 2 plus maybe 1. They're going to win 3 games after this. After that, it was their day, Cory. It's college football. Come on, brother. You know that.
Well, I do know that, but I have not seen an Iowa team embarrassed at home like this in quite some time. I
totally agree.
Embarrassed.
And I believe black and gold. Trust me. My son graduated from Iowa.
Yeah.
I'm from Iowa. I'm from Cedar Falls, Waterloo. So I bleed the black and gold. But I understand what's going on. And I'm just like, You had spoken about Maryland and Penn State being the hiccup or the game that was going to be Iowa's giddy or hitch in their game in their season. I looked at Purdue and I'm like, you know what? Every time it's either Purdue or Northwestern,
Yep.
and those teams could be the bottom of the Big Ten. And you know what? They have Iowa's number for some darn reason. And is it unacceptable? I am not going to say it's unacceptable because, again, you're dealing with college students and you're coming off a big win last week. We don't know what practice was like starting from Monday until Thursday. You know, they're not going to expose that. They're not going to talk about that. And when they do have a good practice through the week, guess what? That is talked about. Not one time this week was a practice talked about the whole week. So I'll tell you what, coming into this game, I was like, you know what? If someone's going to get us, it's going to be these darn Boilermakers. And I honestly, do I think Jeff Brohm is a good head coach? Not at all. I think he's bottom of the Big Ten head coach, but he's got Iowa's number, just like Pat Fitzgerald. Do I think Northwestern's a good coach or a good team? Not at all. Every once in a while, they'll come up with some type of scheme to beat us, but overall, they're not a good team. But for some reason, I'm telling you, they come into their head, and it's just like, I don't understand it. I can't explain it. I look at it. I watched the whole game, and I'm just like, our offensive line on both the left and right side, very soft. Our defense, instead of playing zone, why didn't you go man-to-man, Cory? We have the players to go man-to-man. Do not tell me Hankins and number 22, I cannot recall his name because he started this week. He played a good ball game, Cory. And Hankins, I don't know what was in Hankins' head today, what he was doing, but it was not Iowa defense.
I agree, but Hankins also got burned in man-to-man coverage several times. I mean, early on in this game, it was
okay.
This underneath stuff
right.
To David Bell and Hankins giving up outside leverage.
Okay, I get that, but the underneath stuff, okay, you can give up the underneath stuff, but the deep, like, letting them get behind you, unacceptable, Cory. Unacceptable.
Yeah, you're right.
Unacceptable.
I agree with you.
I mean, I'm not down on this team. I think that with a week off, hopefully we get who's the guy we lost last week against
Moss.
Penn State. Moss, was it right? Moss.
Yep.
I think when we get him back, you could tell a difference in the defense. They just weren't as in tune to what was going on in the field, and you could see that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I appreciate your call, and I do have a couple other callers here lined up, but we hope that you can call on a better note next time, caller.
All right, Cory. Listen, man. Have a good rest of the weekend, and
okay,
we'll be ready when it comes to Wisconsin.
Amen. I can't talk. Beat the Badgers next 2 weeks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. All right. Appreciate the enthusiastic callers tonight, given the circumstances. Let's hop right along to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Yeah, hey, my name's Sam. I'm over in Virginia.
Hey,
from
Sam.
Lincoln, Iowa originally. How's it going? I just have one thing to say. Honestly, honestly, this was bound to happen. Better it happened now than later on the season to save my own disappointment. I think this Iowa team's going to learn from this. And honestly, like, our defense has been playing lights out all year round. Like, yeah, sure, they might have had an off game. And at the end of the day, our offense couldn't step up and just carry the load for once. And it just sucks that I'm not calling for anybody to be fired, but when are you going to start asking questions at the offensive coordinator position? Like he's Kirk Ferentz's son. I get it, but come on, man. We couldn't do anything. And even Spencer Petras, like, look yourself in the mirror. And, I guess we're going to use this bye week to figure it out. But I'm not losing hope in Iowa either. I think we're going to learn from this and still go to the Big Ten championship, but changes need to be made. So that's all I had to say. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Appreciate the call this evening. I do want to address that here before we go to our next caller. Obviously in difficult moments like this, the natural reaction is to look at the coaching staff, to look at your quarterback. And I get that. And I'm not saying that's not deserved, because this is not a blip on the radar for Brian Ferentz. This is a pattern of underperformance. This is rated as the last, I can't even get my thoughts together, people. This is the worst offense in the Big Ten by the numbers. And this is not a new thing. Iowa's consistently finishes in the bottom third of the Big Ten in total offense. We're not looking at total points. We're looking at total offense. Here's the reality, folks. Brian Ferentz is not going anywhere pending some ridiculous scandal. That's the only way Brian Ferentz leaves before Kirk. That's my take. Once Kirk retires, Brian will either get hired as the head coach, or he'll be a head coach in the MAC or a coordinator somewhere else. This is, unfortunately, for those that don't like Brian, and I'm not taking a stance on Brian either way right now because I don't want to live too much in the moment. Brian is not going anywhere. So I get the frustration. And Spencer Petras isn't going anywhere, because Spencer Petras, they're not going to make a quarterback change heading into Madison in 2 weeks, like it or not. That's just how it is. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Cory. This is Logan.
Hey, Logan.
I'm a huge Purdue fan, and I just wanted to ask you, do you think Purdue has a good shot at winning the West still?
I actually do. Yeah, I say good shot. I don't know what the percentages are, and I'm not just saying this in the moment. If you look at this was obviously an underrated Purdue team and probably slightly overrated Iowa team. I think that's fair. But you look at what Purdue has. The defense has obviously improved with Brohm, I think, focusing more on that side of the ball. But they proved today they still know how to attack Iowa. And I'm sure, again, Brohm has had this specialty at attacking Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker over the past several years. But I would have to think, with the skill position talent they have at wide receiver, I know they're down Xander Horvath right now, but the West is up for grabs. Iowa still would be the favorite in my mind. Wisconsin's still in the mix. Minnesota's in the mix. Right now, Purdue's biggest challenge right now is Minnesota, because they lost the tiebreaker there last week. But I absolutely would give them a chance. I don't know what percentage, but they certainly have a chance after this game.
Yeah, they got hosed in that Minnesota game by the refs. But what about, so you think Iowa has the best chance to win the West, and you think Minnesota's next? Is that what you said?
I would probably say that at this point, although Purdue now has the tiebreaker over Iowa. But Iowa's schedule is not that difficult. Have you looked at Iowa's schedule?
Yeah, it looks like they have Nebraska at the end. They have Minnesota. Is that at Minnesota?
It's at home. It's in Iowa City.
Okay. Yeah, looks pretty manageable.
Yeah.
Purdue has Ohio State still.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be tough sledding, but yeah, that's all I wanted to ask you. Thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the call, and always happy to take a call from a Purdue fan. I have nothing against Purdue. Nothing against Purdue. They don't seem to be the whiners that some of the Penn State fans were last week. Of course, it's easier to handle a win more than it is easier to handle a loss. But Gary Lewis says, I like Iowa to win out. Why not? Well, there are some reasons why I could argue against that, Gary. And I will say this. Let me just comment real quickly on the Riley Moss injury. That is by no means the reason why Iowa lost this game, and I'm not going to make it out to be that way. But one has to assume, and I said it going into the game, that was about the worst time for Iowa to lose Riley Moss. It's the worst time, because this is the one team that Iowa year in and year out struggles in the secondary. That's all Purdue does, is throw the ball down the field. And obviously Hankins was getting burned. And if Moss had played in this game, there's no doubt in my mind, Phil Parker at some point I know Phil doesn't like to switch much in his secondary if he's got two guys he likes on one, short side of the field, wide side of the field. But let's be honest, he would have made some changes and he would have given Moss a shot on Bell. Would he have been able to pull it off? I don't know. Bell is spectacular and he was tremendous today, but certainly that injury did not help. That came at about the worst time it could have. Sounds like Moss may be back in 2 weeks, and they need him. So that's my comment. I think the secondary, and then of course Hankins went down shortly before the half, I believe, right? Certainly he came back. I think he was fine. He was getting burned before he went down, so nobody can say he was not 100%, and that's why Iowa was struggling throughout the entire game. Some confident Iowa fans here. I give you credit to say Iowa will win out. That's a pretty large statement at this point. In response to this comment, Iowa always has a cream pie schedule. Well, they went to Iowa State and won by double digits. They play a 9-game conference schedule, and heading into the season, we thought the crossover schedule was actually tough. They played Indiana, who we thought was a top 20 team, and they did play number 4 Penn State last week and won. So you say it's a cream pie schedule. Yeah, the West is down this year. I don't know what I was supposed to do, and I would not call it a cream pie schedule, but I get what you're saying. Blake, feel free to call Blake, and this may be Blake on the line. I'm assuming this is Blake. Thanks for calling back.
Yeah. Hey, I just had one quick question for you. Let me pause this. I didn't expect you to answer so quick. I'm somewhat unfamiliar. I mean, I played football, but I don't know anything about like receiver packages and routes and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of looked like they were just running a generalized route and kind of like poking into gaps. I mean, is that something that they do on high level? I mean, basically, so let's say you're running a slant across the middle, like, just a diagonal or a flag or a post or whatever. Is it something that they can do where the receivers kind of like cut it off at a certain point and the quarterback just leads them to wherever they're going? They don't have something, set. Oh, this is a 10-yard hitch and this is a 15-yard post, and what is that something that exists? Where the wide receivers can actually.
Yeah, that would be an excellent question for Don Patterson. I guess I don't know the answer to that question. Obviously, there are some routes that are designed where the receiver has options based on the coverage post snap, but that would be a question for Don. Right. I think Bell, if that's a thing, caller, if that's a thing, Blake. Obviously, Bell is like one of the few guys who, if you're Brohm, you're probably comfortable giving him some freedom to kind of make decisions in the moment because the guy's spectacular. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but again, that would be a better question for Don.
Yeah, their offense kind of reminds me of, and this is nothing negative against Purdue at all, but it kind of reminds me of like a little bit of backyard football when I was a kid. You just kind of go out and you run a route and you kind of fold yourself into the gaps, and
sure.
Run the opposite way, of the other defenders and stuff like that. I mean, Obviously, whatever they're doing is really effective, particularly against Iowa.
Well, let's be honest, Blake. We saw it early in that game last week against Penn State when Clifford was in there. Penn State was attacking Iowa's zone and hitting him in the gaps. And I wonder, again, I'm not going to talk extensively about the Penn State game because we've ran that game into the ground. But you do wonder, what would Dotson have done had he had a viable quarterback? Aiden O'Connell's not a Heisman contender. I mean, he's a good quarterback who can get the ball to his playmakers. Right now, Iowa doesn't have that. And they also don't have a guy like David Bell. But I just wonder what would have happened had Jahan Dotson had Clifford the entire game or had a quarterback that could effectively get him the ball, because we saw Iowa's defense exposed today. You hope it's just a blip on the radar and a fluke. I don't think it is a fluke, but you hope it's something that can be correctable because, man, you're absolutely right. They picked the defense apart. They picked the secondary apart.
And the other thing, when I made the comment about the press coverage, to me that would almost seem like a under over kind of like double coverage, especially on somebody like Bell. You press them at the line and give our defensive line some chances to put some pressure on the Purdue quarterback and to slow him down on his routes. But I never saw that happen.
No.
It may have, but
I didn't see it either. That's a great point. I continue to say over and over again. Why is there literally one guy? I know they're playing zone, but why is there one guy basically in charge of stopping David Bell down the field? And yeah, you're right. When he was not catching over Hankins or around Hankins, Hankins is giving him a 15-yard cushion. I mean, I don't know how you give a guy a 15-yard cushion on 3rd and 9. I don't understand the logistics behind that.
Yeah. Anyway, I've never been a wide receiver. I wasn't a secondary guy, so I don't know that kind of stuff. But it just blows my mind that, anyway. Anyway, that was it. I appreciate it. Thank you, Cory.
All right, man. Have a good night. Okay, trekking along here as we wait for former Iowa assistant coach Don Patterson. Again, he will be with us soon. And Don is going to help us to think level-headed. I look forward to that. Certainly, he will not sugarcoat things. But him and I did have an interesting text message exchange during the game. So I know Don has some opinions on what happened today, as I'm sure any Iowa guy, but especially a former offensive coordinator, would have. So again, let's trek down in our comments as we're waiting for Don here. Question here from Captain Genius. How far does Iowa drop after losing to a, well, I don't know what that means. I'm assuming to an unranked team. Yeah, Alabama went down 4 spots, losing to a 2-loss unranked team. I assume he meant 2-loss Purdue team. We were talking about that as we continued into the second half, and it was clear that Iowa was not going to be able to work their way back into this game. I think the answer to that question is they're clearly, from my point of view, if I was the committee, and I think Mark Rogers will probably reflect this in his rankings, but I would probably rank Iowa around like 14, 15 because their resume is still quality, but to lose at home to a Purdue team that's unranked and struggled. Remember, Purdue struggled to beat Illinois a few weeks ago. So even though I did make a comment earlier that I think Purdue has the ability to compete for the West, their resume is not all that impressive. They weren't real competitive against Notre Dame, although they kept it close for a little while. I would say right around 13 to 14 would be at least my rankings, but given what the AP committee does, they'll probably end up 9 or 10. And I don't agree with that. I think they should be lower than that, but that's just my prediction as far as what the AP will do. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Cory, it's Michael. How you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you, Michael?
Not too bad. Hey, I got a question. I'm just looking through Purdue's remaining schedule. I got Wisconsin next week at Ross State Stadium, which is going to be probably rock and rolling considering it's a sellout and stuff like that. They also have Michigan State, Ohio State as 2 remaining games like that, but Michigan State's at Ross State. Who do you think more likely? Is it Michigan State or Ohio State, or do you think Purdue's defense can hang in there and maybe beat both? I mean, help have a shot to beat Ohio State, considering they've had their number in the past and stuff like that. And it's always been close games.
If I'm looking at this schedule again from an Iowa perspective, I would favor Purdue over Nebraska. I would favor Purdue over Northwestern, and I would favor Purdue over Indiana. So there's 3 wins right there. So automatically you're a 7-win team. Certainly the Michigan State game will be a difficult game, but I thought Michigan State, they've shown some chinks in the armor. They struggled to beat Indiana today. So that's a winnable game. That game is in West Lafayette. And the Wisconsin game is in West Lafayette. So you get some good home action there. If Purdue beats Wisconsin next week, I would say that Purdue is right there with Iowa as far as the front runner for the West. And that pains me to say that, but given the schedule ahead, again, besides the Ohio State game, the schedule for Purdue is not that difficult. Michigan State's good, but I believe they're beatable.
Now, who does Iowa have for the remainder of the season with the crossover, or are they done with the crossover in the East?
They're done with their crossovers, right? They went 3-0 against their crossovers. So they get Wisconsin, they get Northwestern on the road, they get Minnesota, Illinois, and then Nebraska on the road. So the schedule for Iowa is very manageable. That's why I said earlier I would still favor Iowa to win the West at this point because they have the easiest schedule of the contenders. Minnesota, of course, has just 1 loss in the conference, but you look at their schedule. They don't have a real difficult schedule either, but they do have to come to Iowa City and they have to go to Bloomington. So Iowa, to me, given the home matchup against Minnesota, has the best schedule left. Or the easiest schedule,
I was
the
just
most
wondering.
manageable.
Yeah. But like I said, I kept telling people this in the past, and everybody said it was crazy and stuff. Purdue only had that, really that one turnover. It was kind of, I guess, because he was stretching out and stuff. But if you can play with and have no turnovers, you got a 95% chance of beating Iowa because their offense is pretty inept.
Well, so far you're absolutely right on that. Yeah. And now here's what I'll say: Kent State and Colorado State, they both played Iowa even on turnovers and both lost. But remember, those games were actually competitive. Like Kent State was right there at halftime. Colorado State had the lead at halftime. So Iowa has a lot to prove because you're absolutely right. This is the first game where we've seen a team actually turn the tables on Iowa as far as turnovers. Got Spencer Petras to make some big mistakes. And when you get behind, if you're an Iowa team, and I'm not talking down by 7 or even down by 10, we saw Iowa fight out of a hole last week. But man, when you get down 2 or 3 scores, it's basically over because and the commentators talked about it during the game on ESPN or on ABC. They were talking, Iowa doesn't have the playmakers to climb out of a big hole.
Mm-hmm. I was just wondering, hey, great show as always. Thanks for taking my Cory and call Cory and have a great night.
Appreciate it. You have a good night as well. All right, moving along here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Cory. This is Ben.
Ben, how are you?
Disagree with you tonight on something about the AP poll.
Okay.
I feel maybe if the AP has been judged different, I think Iowa should drop maybe to below 10. But if you look, Alabama lost to an unranked team that was already mentioned, but also Oregon lost to Stanford, and they dropped 4 when they were in the top 4.
Well,
and they dropped 4. So
correct me if I'm wrong.
I wouldn't expect them to drop much more than 6.
Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. The Oregon lost to Stanford, and what was the other one? Alabama. The Alabama lost to A&M. Correct me if I'm wrong, but both of those losses were on the road, correct?
I'm not sure. Maybe Stanford was.
So
maybe that could be correct.
Both of those games were on the road. That's one factor that I would look at. And the other factor is how those teams lost. Alabama lost in the final minutes. It was a close game. Oregon lost in overtime. Had Iowa lost this game on the road at Purdue by 7, this would be a totally different discussion, totally different show, but it's how Iowa lost. This was a lopsided. The game was, I guess you could say it was close early, but it never really was close. Purdue basically managed this game from the second quarter to the fourth quarter, and to do that in Iowa City with a sold-out Kinnick, that's why I give Iowa a larger bump.
Yeah, I could see maybe 6 for that reason, but at the same time, you got to look at Alabama didn't have many close games, but Oregon, they came close a couple times before that. They were, I didn't think Oregon deserved to be even ranked where they were. There's some other things you could look at. Close wins, and then you can look at how Iowa handle themselves, the rest of most of the season. If you compare that, if you just compare that directly to what Oregon had done up to the point they lost, I still think, Iowa looks like a better team.
So I have a question for you, Ben. And I know this is just total speculation, but if you had to rank these teams based on what you actually believe as far as who you believe to be the top 10 teams. I'm not talking about talent rankings, but I'm talking about everything that makes a top 10 team a top 10 team. Is Iowa a top 10 team right now? Do you think they're one of the 10 best teams in the country right now, collectively?
No, honestly, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I would put them in the top 25 for sure. But I think I'd put them about where you said, the 14, 15. But I wasn't basing it from what I feel the AP should do. was basing it off from what I think the AP would do and what they have shown this year so far.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, Ben, is this year is weird, so teams are going to continue to lose. This is an interesting comment. I know you maybe can't see our screen right now, but Tyler Jenkins makes this note. Iowa just needs to win out. They can still make the CFP. That's actually, I think, very much true. Now, is it logical to think that Iowa is going to win out? And this would include a win in the Big Ten title game, first of all. If they lose to Ohio State in the title game, you got 2 losses, you're 11-2, you're done. But technically, this is absolutely true. There is no margin for error now. But if you actually are a believer in Iowa, and I'm not saying yes or no, I am or not, but if you are a believer still in this team, technically this is correct. Iowa can still make the playoff if they win out.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. I mean, I'm a Michigan fan, and I was really pulling for Iowa this year, and I still am. But also, when I look at who they played, Purdue is almost, if you look at the way Purdue plays, if you're an Iowa fan, Purdue is the last team I think you want to face, because what Iowa, I think, forces you to do is they force you to pass the way Purdue does every game. So it's like nothing Purdue is not used to. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and
I looked at the matchup and I thought that was going to be a lot closer. I was, some of my friends think, thought Purdue was going to get, beat by Iowa, but I looked at Purdue being a lot tougher of a matchup for Iowa.
Well, anybody who overlooked Purdue, now I predicted Iowa would win this game by 14 points, but anybody who overlooked Purdue as an Iowa fan has a short-term memory, because again, Purdue's beaten Iowa now 4 of the last 5 years. That's not a fluke. That is, again, a bad matchup for Iowa's defense.
Yeah. I mean, Purdue's done that, and Purdue's done that to many teams. Yeah, I remember, I just overlooking Purdue is probably always a mistake, because even when they look bad, they have a good track record of upsetting teams.
But that's the problem though, caller. Jeff Brohm has had, of course, early on in his career, his tenure at Purdue, the guy really coached up the defense, or at least he had coordinators that were able to make that defense one of the better units in the Big Ten. And that lasted for a couple of years, and then it was more so the offense got explosive. And then recently, Brohm committed himself more to helping on the defensive side of things. And this year has been mainly a defensive display. They've held a lot of teams under 20 points, I believe, if I look back at the schedule. And so that's what's weird about them. They're just not consistent enough to be able to get to a point where you're competing for the West every year. But to me, as far as a guy, if I could pick any coach in the Big Ten to scheme up a game plan for my opponent this week on maybe a short week, or, they had a long week because they had a bye week, right? I think I'm correct in saying they had a bye week going into this Iowa game. I would pick Jeff Brohm, though.
Yeah. So.
To me, he's the best game day coach, maybe in the Big Ten, at least in the West. And that's no disrespect to Paul Chryst and Ferentz and, whoever else. But to me, he's the best game day coach in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, and I wonder how some of these coaches go on preparing for some of these games. I mean, I don't know how much emphasis he puts throughout the year on the Iowa game, or maybe they over prepare for Iowa. There's other things you can consider that way.
Why would he put so much emphasis on the Iowa game? I don't think he.
I'm not saying that. But he did get an extra week. But I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying it could have been the case though when they played OSU and beat them at home like 49 to something, not 49 to 20 something. I'm just when you're a team like Purdue and you're already got a couple. You don't have it's the win for you is those big games. The big games like Iowa, the big game. When Iowa's 6-0.
Yeah.
That's a Super Bowl for your team.
Yeah, and
so these kids are coming in and giving everything you got, and for Iowa, it's just another day.
Yeah,
I look at it like that too. I mean, it's maintained. It's the middle part. I mean, you know, I can see being an Iowa fan being easy to be like, we just got beat by Purdue and kind of, you know, really feeling down. But you know, it's the middle season of the Big Ten. You know, those guys has Iowa even had a bye yet?
No, they get their bye this coming week, and it
You know,
comes
and
at a good time.
Badly needed one.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you're just getting beat up, you know, throughout the season, and you know, one of these teams. I don't think it's all is lost. What I would worry about as Iowa is just like you talked about with earlier in the season, whether they can maintain turnovers.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think a lot's gonna you know, depend on whether they can get more production out of their offense. They did not get today.
Yeah, well,
and I think those are the things. But there's a thing too, you know, from a team going from when they played, their offense I didn't think was very productive, but that can change. That's something that's correctable.
Well, but here's the deal, and I know you're not an Iowa fan, but this is a yearly thing. I don't care who the quarterback is. Iowa never has an explosive offense. So, and you have a quarterback who is right now a statue in the pocket, and when the play breaks down, Spencer Petras has no idea what to do. He's got no clue. He can't scramble. He's not good throwing on the run. When he's good actually on like a boot action play throwing on the run. We saw that last week to Nico Regani on the big play down the field, but he doesn't know how to escape out of trouble and make a play. And he can't do it with his feet. He's not physically capable of doing it. He's not fast enough. So they have weapons. Keegan Johnson continues to look good. You know, I know Sam Laporta has been the leading receiver, but they do have wide receivers. Tyrone Tracy's been a huge disappointment this year. Huge disappointment. But, you know, I get what you're saying. I don't have a whole lot of faith right now in this offense, and I think a lot of fans would probably share that same sentiment. Brian Ferentz has not gotten it done consistently at any point during his career at Iowa.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand that from a fan's perspective. I was watching. I didn't watch the whole game, but I did see some. I believe, if I recall, some points that were definitely left. I believe there's somebody. I believe he missed a good shot to the end zone. Where he had a guy wide open. He threw to the guy underneath him. And you know, I had a couple questions of some things that happened on the field, and even as far as actually, if I want to ask you real quick before I forget, I seen a couple. I didn't watch the whole game. I kind of just switching back and forth. I seen I think it was a pass interference called on Iowa, where it looked like the receiver was engaged in blocking for a pass to the outside guy, to the wide receiver, and then there was accidental contact, and they called that a pass interference.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Jack Campbell, and Jack Campbell was trying to get out to the back, and he ran. I mean, I thought it was an okay call. I wasn't upset with it. I thought they butchered the call at the end. I thought Iowa had the first down on the QB sneak with Spencer.
Oh, yeah, that for sure. Yeah, that was messed up.
At that point in the game, though, I mean, Iowa had gotten outclassed, outprepared, outcoached, outplayed. It didn't matter.
Yeah. Well, that was the only thing. No, one thing is I'm curious about that. I didn't see if that kind of, it almost looks like a pick play. And I wasn't sure if it's, he seems like he's pretty awful far off the line of scrimmage to be, and it almost seemed like a pick play. And I didn't know if that was
Are you talking about the touchdown?
The whole game. No, I'm talking about that pass, pass interference.
Yeah, I don't think it was a pick play. I don't know the rule. I know the commentators talked about on the touchdown that the other receivers were angled towards the quarterback, and that obviously helps you avoid getting called for that. But I didn't think that on the Campbell play. I guess I didn't pay close enough attention to it. Yeah,
I was just curious if that was you know, maybe a scheme that was going on with that, because I didn't watch a lot of the game.
Sure.
I seen Purdue move, you know, just on the box scores, moving the ball. And I was like, oh. Yeah. But anyways, hey, I'll let somebody else somebody else get on the line for you. It was nice talking to you, Cory. Enjoy your show. And better luck next week to all you Hawks, man. I'm rooting for you.
Appreciate it, man. Maybe we'll meet Michigan in the title game. We hope.
I would love that, man. I would love that.
Okay, take care.
You take care.
All right. I want to thank our caller here for waiting. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Nick from Jacksonville, Florida.
Hey, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, been a Hawkeye fan for 40 years, man.
You know,
and you called it last week.
I did?
You called it last week about the Purdue passing game, and they were switching out the quarterbacks. And, oh, my God.
Well,
unbelievable.
I did not call them. I did not predict a loss, so I did get that wrong. I appreciate you bringing that up, that I was right about it, but I wish I was not right about the Purdue passing game, because this has been, and it's not like
what is with Iowa with Purdue, man? This is their fourth loss out of 5 times.
Yeah, I don't know. That again, I'll be anxious to hear from Coach Patterson, because there is something that Brohm is attacking that Phil Parker, for some reason, unbeknownst to, I think, anyone other than maybe Brohm and his staff, there's something that it doesn't matter who the personnel is for Iowa, and for that matter for Purdue, or we're talking all the way back into 2017. This
I know.
Continuous,
I watch every game, buddy. Every game.
I mean, there's something out there right now that Phil Parker just cannot seem to solve with Brohm's offense, and I don't really know what it is. Obviously, you can simplify it and say, well, the receivers are just out, they're better athletes. Iowa's played good receivers. They played Ty Freifogel with Indiana this year. They played Dotson last week. The kid for Maryland, I know he got hurt, Demas. He's one of the better receivers in the Big Ten. A lot of good receivers in the Big Ten, but this is a yearly thing, and I don't get it either.
I just don't get it. And it's like they're Achilles heel. I mean, they got 9 wins, most ever against top 2 teams.
Yeah,
it's unreal.
And of course, not all of that is, Coach Brohm, but that program, they seem to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, did they have a bye week last week? I'm
yes,
not
they
sure
did.
on that one.
Yes, they did, I believe.
Yeah. But,
yep, that always hurts.
I caught your show last week. You're awesome, bud. You're awesome.
Appreciate it, man. I appreciate that.
First time I've ever seen it.
We had another caller from Jacksonville. I think we had another caller from Jacksonville last week. I believe it was Brandon. So we got some Iowa fans down there in Jacksonville. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And I put it out there. I'll hear it tomorrow, though. But whatever.
Well, I will say this. I said the same thing to Brandon when he called last week. People in Jacksonville, I can't imagine football fans in Jacksonville are very happy right now with the Urban Meyer saga.
Oh, no. But it was kind of, I think he got fed up, but he knows better. Dude, Urban Meyer knows better. But he's a good coach. He's a winner. But we'll see what plays out tomorrow.
He's got to start winning there.
Yeah. So, and the offense, oh my God, it's just so bad.
Yeah.
The offense is so bad.
What's the solution
for Iowa? I mean, how long has Brian been the offensive coordinator? I know he was with the Ohio State game when we beat the pants off of Ohio State. Was that his first year, or was that his second year?
I'd have to look back. It was either 2016 or 2017, because I recall, surprisingly enough, Greg Davis was the offensive coordinator in that 2015 run.
Yeah. Good season.
Yeah.
But another team, Northwestern, Achilles heel in Iowa.
Good. Listen, if Iowa loses to Northwestern this year, we got big problems.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it. I knew Purdue was a decent team. I knew they were. They're 3-2. It's football. I mean, you got to play the game. But I mean, they were just so bad.
So
like you said about preachers, and I was listening to your phone conversation with the other guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, if that play ain't there, he doesn't know what to do. I mean, it's just.
He's helpless.
I just don't get it, man.
And
But,
we noticed this. You noticed this too, caller, real quick before you hang up. One thing that Spencer does when he gets pressured in the pocket, he looks like he's trying to get out of the pocket, but he doesn't really know how to go about it, and then he ends up stumbling for a sack.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know the solution either. I mean, a lot of people are calling for the coordinator to be fired. I see Doug's comment here, but that's not going to happen mid-season.
You can't do that in the middle of the season. You can't do that.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and we still got a chance. We went out. We can go to the Big Ten championship game, but we just got to get some fixing done. You know,
and like I said earlier, it's a matter of, and I'm going to talk more about this after our conversation, caller, but it's a matter of just, I think, throwing this game out the window, and you just got to move past it. I don't think you can really dissect.
And Kirk Ferentz always does that, and that's why he's a good coach.
That is true.
And he will move past this game, and they'll play they play to the end. You know.
You're right. You're right.
I love Iowa. I'm always going to be a Hawk, and go Hawkeyes. Okay. And
Appreciate
love your
that,
show,
man.
buddy.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, later. Bye.
Appreciate that call from Jacksonville, Florida. Okay. As we await Don Patterson, again, I appreciate everybody being patient with Don. He is dealing with some health issues or procedural things. I don't want to get too far into it, and if he wants to share it, he can, but he is en route home right now. Let's take our next call here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Oh, they're gone. Let's try it again. Maybe. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? Hello. They're all gone. All right. We have no callers in the queue, so you're welcome to call in 860-499-3332. 860-499-3332. Okay. As we await Don Patterson, okay, I want to discuss this because we can dissect this game till we're blue in the face. We can talk about Iowa's secondary and Matt Hankins having probably the worst game of his career. We can talk about Spencer Petras throwing, 4 picks in the end. We can talk about, coaching. We can talk about Philip Parker not having a good game plan, or Kirk obviously not measuring up in this game from a coaching standpoint. I'm sure he'd be the first to admit that. But I think as an Iowa fan, I think the coaching staff probably ends up taking a similar approach to this loss. How do you process things? Was this a result of, I guess, 3 options, right? Is it a fluke? A, I don't believe that to be true, but I guess that could be an argument that this is a fluke game. B, maybe Iowa's just not that good, and we're just realizing that, right? Or C, this is just a really bad matchup, and Iowa will bounce back in a big way with an extra week to prep. I would probably lean towards option 3. To me, there is no fluke when you lose 4 of 5 games against the same team and you have the same receiver burning you year after year after year. Okay? So, to me, it's not a fluke. There's no way, to me, you can argue that it's a fluke. I think there's no question. In my opinion, Iowa was somewhat overrated. How overrated? I don't know, but they're not the number 2 team in the country right now. Moss being out hurt, right? I know they were also down Cody Ince. If people didn't realize, Cody Ince at right guard did not play in this game, and he has been a regular contributor on that offensive line. So that didn't help. Luke Lachey, tight end 2, also did not play in that game. Those aren't excuses. We're by no means saying those are the reasons why Iowa lost this game. But my point is, you combine a matchup with an injury in Moss, probably your most important position, especially defensively in a game against Purdue. It just was a bad series of events. So there's reason for some cautious optimism moving forward. But again, we'll talk more with Don about that. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with the Voice of College Football. Who's this?
Hi, this is Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, man. Purdue has always had Iowa's number for many, many years. And for whatever reason, they always bring their game up against the Hawks. I think this is more of a fluky type game, just based on the great receiver that they have and kind of their weird offense. I don't think this is going to be something where Iowa's going to fall off, start losing 2-3 games in a row. So I look forward to the bye week, get everything right, everything healthy, and then come back and win at Wisconsin.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the correct outlook to have. People are upset. People are emotional about it. I'm sure the players are down, but this is an excellent time for a bye week. It's an excellent time to get some guys healthy and to regroup, because every one of their goals, if you look at the schedule ahead, every one of their goals is still ahead of them.
Absolutely. We could still win the Big Ten. I mean, they could very easily, they're still in first place in the Big Ten West. I mean, people forget that. Purdue still has to play Ohio State, and I think they have to play Michigan State. And so they're probably going to lose 1 or 2 more games. And if we run the table and beat Wisconsin, we're right there in Indianapolis.
And caller, right now, Minnesota is I want to say the dark horse, but they've won 2 straight now. And they don't have a real difficult schedule. They do have to come to Iowa City, but Minnesota right now is right there in the race for the West.
Well, we've had Minnesota's number. You look a couple years ago when they were undefeated. They came. Yeah. I don't remember if they came to Iowa City or if we went to Minnesota. We took them out when they were ranked in the top 10. So we've had Minnesota's number very similar to the way that Purdue's had our number. You are right on that. And certainly that's going to be a big game as far as how the West plays out. These next few weeks are going to be huge. Yep. So don't despair, Hawk fans. We're going to be fine. Get back to the drawing board and we didn't have a single turnover. The defense didn't play well. We have a great defense, but they didn't play well today. Purdue had a good game plan. Credit to them. They've always kind of had our number. We're not going to face another receiver like David Bell for the rest of the season unless we play him in the Big Ten championship game or the bowl game. So, I'm pretty optimistic for our season going forward. I appreciate that positive outlook. I do. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Appreciate all the calls here this evening. And again, we have a nice comment here from Blake. He says, I'm looking forward to what Don has to say. I hope he doesn't hold back. And Don Patterson is with us. Don, Blake doesn't want you to hold back. Now, we have had a lot of mixed response from some of our callers today. I want to give you the floor briefly. Don, what happened?
Well, football's a funny game. I've always said that's why people pay good money to watch, is they don't know for sure what's going to happen. Sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, and sometimes the surprise is not very pleasant at all. And today was one of those days. A wise old coach by the name of Bill Brazier, our old defensive coordinator from the 80s and the 90s, once said, you're never as good as you think you are, and you're also never as bad as you think you are either. So right now we have some players that think they're pretty bad. They're not. They're still a good football team. They just didn't show it today. But I think Purdue had a lot to do with that. I thought today was a clinic in terms of how to move the football by forward pass. They really did a great job at throwing and catching the ball. Unusual plan that they were able to pull it off. They actually, in my mind, they clearly had 3 different quarterbacks with 3 different plans, and they had them all mapped out. I think those guys that went on the field, those second and third quarterbacks, those plays they ran today are the same ones they practiced all week, and the vast majority of them worked. So it kept us all balanced there. I think it's safe to say they were more comfortable running the quarterback with the second and third team quarterbacks. They didn't want to run with AOC, with O'Connor, but they certainly ran the other 2. And that bothered us some too, because Q-Draw once again reared its ugly head. And, the bottom line is we didn't force any turnovers. We couldn't get off the field on defense. They converted so often, even on 3rd and long. And of course, in the end, we turned the ball over 4 times. So thank God for the game, because I should be more specific. The punt return and kick return game, because otherwise we didn't have much of a bright spot today.
Yeah, when we first jumped on, and we're sitting at about an hour, Don. When I first jumped on, that was what I said. I couldn't really scrounge up a place where Iowa won any battles today. And then I thought, well, the kick return battle late in the game, I'm going to call it a battle, but Iowa did produce a couple nice kick returns. Charlie Jones with the punt return and Ivory Kelly Martin with the kick return. Here's me being negative during the game, Don. When that happened, when both of those happened, I turned to my family who was watching the game with, and I said, they're not going to score. They're not going to get in the end zone. It was just one of those days you just feel, and of course, that's not a good attitude to have if you're a player, and I'm not saying they had that attitude, but Don, it was just one of those days where nothing worked anywhere on the field offensively, and certainly Spencer had his worst game of the season. How does he bounce back after, boy, there's going to be a lot of the outside noise, especially going into a bye week towards Spencer.
Right. Well, if I were coaching Spencer, I would remind him, you've been getting more credit than you deserve for these last 6 wins. Here's the other side of that coin. You're going to get more blame than you deserve for today's loss. So not that you didn't have a big hand in it, because you did, but it wasn't all your fault. We fell short in too many ways to count today. And again, give a lot of credit to Purdue. You've heard me say before, I said all along, I said Jeff Brohm will have a good plan.
Yes.
He's one of the best offensive minds in the Big Ten, maybe the best.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he did. And of course, the defensive staff is new, and they've done a great job of getting those guys lined up right, and they're playing hard, and they have reason to play, because they're stopping people with some success, and they have reason to be excited about each and every game left on their schedule.
Don, how do you account for these numbers?
Talking about David Bell?
Yeah. How do you account?
Well,
how do you explain that against this defense?
Well, frankly, David Bell's a great player. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Sets soft hands, has a great idea of how to get open. The one frustration I had, the one thing we could have done, we never really tried to come up with a plan specifically to slow him down. Let me just say it this way. If somebody's beating you over the head with their preferred style of play, then one of the things you need to do is make them play left-handed. You need to take that away from them. And that means you got to come up with a defense that's designed to stop number 3. And if you do that, at least you got a better chance with all those other guys. And there are things we could have done that would have helped. Too many times I made a note during the game. I said, way too much single coverage on David Bell. And I think as the game wore on, he got in our heads a little bit as pass defenders, to the point where we were playing off of him so far that we couldn't make plays. He was dictating to us more so than we were dictating to him. So one obvious solution is give that one defender out there that happens to be assigned to guard Bell, give him some help. And there are ways you can do that, of course. And I will admit that if you think outside the box and come up with a defense designed to slow one particular guy down, obviously there's a chance during the course of the game that they're going to figure that out and put the ball elsewhere. But I still rather do that than give up 240 yards to one receiver.
And this is Don. He had 200 yards, 2 years ago, and like 130 last year. So there is no question in my mind that right now, and you said it, Brohm is maybe the best offensive mind in the Big Ten. Certainly, if I had to pick a coach to devise a game plan, an offensive game plan, and I had any coach in the West, boy, I'd pick Brohm every time, because he's a savant with learning how to scheme against what has been the best defense probably in the Big Ten, Don.
Yeah, here's another factor in today's game, and we talked about it a week ago. I was a little bit concerned because they had 2 weeks to get ready for us. And I mentioned that's a little like a bowl preparation, because you have more than a week to put your plan together. And I think that probably had something to do with it today, too. They had more time to work on us than we had to work on them.
Don, here's one observation I had during the game, and as we continued throughout the game, it seemed to me that Iowa actually caught a number of breaks in this game. For instance, Iowa was down towards the goal line. I believe it was second quarter, and Petrus throws what should have been a pick six. I mean,
Right.
that ball was going back to the house, and it's just dropped. It's just dropped. So they get away with that. Then you have the missed 31-yard field goal. Now, you could argue, well, Iowa also missed a field goal. The only reason Iowa had a field goal try is because of the dropped pick. Purdue misses the 31-yard field goal, and then you have later in the game this what by inches would have been a touchdown, but he lets go of the ball short of the pylon, and it ends up being a touchback. And that was the right call, Don, but those are a lot of breaks, and Iowa could not capitalize on any of them, including those two big returns by Kelly Martin and by Jones.
Yeah, that was a real break there on the pylon. I said at the time, I said, looks to me like he actually let go of the ball before it hit the pylon, and that's exactly what happened. And at that point, of course, it's a fumble by definition. It was our only turnover today.
Yeah.
It's a fumble. It's a fumble that goes out of bounds in the end zone as soon as it hits the pylon. Officially, it's in the end zone. And at that point, the only call is touchback. So we were lucky. You're right. We dodged another one. It would have been 31-7 with how the game ended up playing out. You would have had to add in 7 more points.
So obviously Iowa ran the ball okay in the first half. Don, what did you see from Tyler Goodson? I thought he played well early, but when you dig yourselves a hole, you kind of have to abandon the run.
Yeah, they just did such a great job. We could not get off the field defensively. And the other side of that coin, of course, is we didn't sustain drives very well on offense. Just to give you an idea about analytics, everybody always enjoys hearing about analytics. There were 3 parameters out of 25. I looked at their last 11 games, which of course included last year's Iowa game. And 25 parameters in 11 different games. That's 275 evaluations. I did all those, and there were 3 parameters that stood out. And I'll touch on it now because it's ancient history. The team that had won first quarter scoring had won 9 out of 10 games. There was one tie in there, but 9 out of 10 times, the team that won first quarter scoring had won the game, 90% win. As a matter of fact, the only exception happened to be a game, as I recall, it was Purdue winning the first quarter and yet still losing to Notre Dame. That was the one exception. So as I explained it to the coaches, if you win the first quarter, I'll put it this way, any opponent that's won the first quarter against Purdue has won the game every time in all 11 games. Of course, sometimes Purdue won the first quarter, and typically they won the game, the only exception being Notre Dame. So that was one. We needed to win the first quarter. We failed to do that. Secondly, we needed to win on red zone scoring success because that percentage was not 9 out of 10, but it was, as I recall, 8 out of 9. 8 out of 9 games, a couple of ties. 8 out of 9 is 89% win. You need to win on red zone scoring success. And furthermore, a year ago, that's precisely why we lost to Purdue. We both had 5 opportunities in the red zone. They made better with their chances than we did ours. And of course, in a close game, that's the difference in the game. And then number 3, the team that had any edge on turnovers had won 6 out of 7 times. There were 4 ties in there. Matter of fact, we tied them last year on turnovers. And of course, that's 86% win. Here's the bottom line. Purdue today won all 3 of those. I don't even have to go back and check. I know they did. They beat us in the red zone. They beat us on turnovers. And they beat us in first quarter scoring. So we were 0 for 3. Another way to look at it would simply be this. Let's look at all the teams that beat Purdue over the last 2 years. And what parameters do those teams have in common? There were 3. The team, in all cases that beat Purdue, ran for more yards, had more rushing attempts, and had fewer pass attempts. I'm pretty sure that Purdue ran for more yards. I think they had more rushing attempts in the end. And then I think we probably did beat them on fewer passing attempts, but that's not good enough. That's 1 area.
No, and it's hard to not have fewer pass attempts because they have no run game. I mean,
right.
They had one running back on scholarship heading into this game, and it was a kid who'd been hurt. King Doru had been hurt, and everybody else is a walk-on. And I'm just amazed on it. And you talked about red zone scoring success. Purdue was one of the worst teams, maybe the worst team in the Big Ten heading into this game as far as red zone efficiency.
Yeah, primarily because they were ineffective in running the ball.
Right.
Yeah, and they were one-dimensional.
So again, I don't have the red zone numbers specifically in front of me. I'd have to go back and figure it, but certainly they improved in that category today. And Iowa's red zone defense, I I don't know what, I'd have to track the games, but Iowa's red zone defense doesn't look all that great right now. We
No,
saw
not
Penn
today.
State have some success last week in the red zone.
You're right.
Okay, so let's take a look at Spencer Petras' numbers, Don. I know this has been a hot topic with people. A lot of people are attacking Brian and the offensive play calling, but Spencer certainly played a large role in this loss. Very similar numbers, actually, to last week. So last week against Penn State, let me pull up the numbers for Spencer last week. Last week against Penn State, Spencer was 17 of 31 for $195, but he had just one interception and 2 touchdowns. So he ends up with 4 picks today, no TDs. He looked like Spencer of last year, Don. I mean, that's how I would describe him. Where does he go? I know you talked about shaking it off and what the coaches are telling him, but he is, one of the comments I made earlier is he really looks helpless, at least from my vantage point. And George Karlaftis, I give him credit. He was all over. Number 5 was all over Spencer today. He was all over both tackles. But when Spencer is pressured in the pocket, he doesn't know what to do. He's helpless back there.
Yeah. I did talk with you sometime in the past about flush drills. I would strongly recommend we need to practice flush situations more, primarily because we don't have any guarantee that we're going to be able to hold them out of there very long enough. And of course, at that point, it does become a flush drill. Whether you like it or not, it's a flush drill. So my point would be, I think part of our problem is when we do flush, the responsibility is with Spencer to try to make something good happen, but it also lies with the receivers. And we talked about it before. You know this because we talked about it. You don't work parallel. You either work deep or you work back toward the ball. You work in the direction that the quarterback's working. Otherwise, you're no factor anyway because he can't find you. He can't get the ball to you. So first priority, work in the same direction he's flushing. If he flushes left, you better be running left. And for that matter, you only got 2 options: work deep or come back to the ball. Come back toward the line of scrimmage, I should say. And whatever you do, don't work parallel because there's going to be some defender undercutting your route at that point. And that's how interceptions occur. So it looks to me like we're not very good when the play breaks down, as you said. And part of the problem, of course, is Spencer's below average just in terms of escapability. He doesn't have great escapability. But that's okay in that if the receivers understand better how to react to any kind of flush situation, and of course it all starts with if we can just avoid 3rd and long, avoid 2nd and long, if we can better and more efficient on 1st and 2nd downs, because right now our percentages of third down are too much long yardage and not enough short yardage.
Don, there's a question from Blake Jameson. He called in earlier. So he's asking you to speak on calling routes and the receivers adjusting depths and angles to fold into the defense. Is that a thing in college football? So the way he described it is, does David Bell or these elite receivers in the Big Ten, do they have some sort of flexibility? I mean, according to Blake, what he saw a lot today was Bell sort of, at least from his point of view, Bell kind of being able to adjust his route given post-snap coverage. Do you get what I'm saying there, Don? Is that a thing in the Big Ten?
Yeah, we had kind of expanded on this a little bit. We actually had calls. If we wanted to throw the ball to a particular receiver, we might simply designate the play. Give an example of a play action pass. Pro right 44 W given. We're saying W, the flanker receiver. You're the primary receiver. We're telling you we want to get you the ball. And today's equivalent, of course, would be David Bell. So all we're asking you to do is assess the coverage and run the proper route. So you do have route options at that point. And, of course, an experienced receiver like David Bell can generally have a good idea as to how to adjust his route to take care of the particular coverage.
And I think we saw that today. Certainly he has the ability. He's one of the more – I think he's the best receiver in the Big Ten, Don. Maybe I'm certainly biased after what we saw today. I know everybody's gushing over Dotson and Freifogel and even Demas for Maryland. There's a lot of good wide receivers. This is not the year of the quarterback in the Big Ten, Don, but it's the year of the wide receiver. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think you're right. And honestly, I would give the edge to Bell. Some of the other receivers you mentioned, they're outstanding players, but they don't have his height. They don't have his length. And to be honest with you, I think in terms of soft hands, I would probably, give David Bell the edge over all of the receivers. I think he's maybe the least likely to drop a ball of all of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, running along here. Our call line is open. If you want to call, we had a lot of callers earlier, but if you want to ask Don a question, 860-499-3332. 860-499-3332. Okay, Don, how do you handle this loss moving forward? And I talked about this before you jumped on. I almost think, from my perspective, that this is a moment in time where if you're Kirk Ferentz, you tell your guys, okay, we're going to take a few days off, kind of clear your mind. And I'm not saying you don't look at any tape from this game, but there was so little that went right in this game. I almost feel like just flush it and move on. Am I right in that, Don, or you have to dissect this?
Well, the only problem with that is that you have some players, specifically offensive line comes to mind. There's some assignment errors, I would imagine, in the O-line. There's certainly some technique errors. So you got inexperienced players playing in the O-line. The best way for them to get better, of course, is for you to be able to point out to them the mistakes they made today, be able to show them the video and explain what they might have done to make a difference in a particular play. So I would still for sure point out the mistakes that they made. I wouldn't dwell on it. I would simply say, whatever the day might be, I'm assuming it's either Sunday or Monday. I would hope not tomorrow. I would hope Kirk would say, I don't want to see anybody tomorrow. You guys need a break. The coaches need a break. But just for the sake of argument, if it is Monday, when you meet with the players in terms of looking at the video, you need to correct the mistakes that are assignment errors. You need to correct the mistakes that are obvious technique mistakes. But you don't need to beat them over the head with the video. My point is, if Karlaftis beats one of our tackles with a particular pass set, and you know beyond any shadow of a doubt that the tackle already understands what he did wrong, you don't need to show 5 of those snaps. You just need to show 1.
Okay.
And in that regard, it might not be as painful to watch that video as it would otherwise be. So you just selectively show the video. You might even mention, this is a mistake you made against a really good edge rusher. By the way, you made this mistake other times too. We're just going to show you one of them. Let's just focus on this one, but just be aware that mistake reared its ugly head 2 or 3 other times, whatever the case might be. And you just got to keep it positive. I know my advice to young coaches all the time. They say, give me some advice about how to be a better head coach. And I said, well, for starters, your job is to build them up and not tear them down. So they don't need to hear how sorry they are. They need to hear the mistakes they made. Here's how to do it better. You need to build them up, and you need to remind them all over again, that is not the real Iowa team that played against Purdue. That's the worst version of Iowa football. And nothing says we have to have another game like that the rest of the year. That's what I would do. I would try to put a positive spin on it and explain to them, we're going to talk about the mistakes that we made. We're going to look at the video. We're going to learn from it. We're going to be smarter at the end of this video session. But I'm going to beat you over the head with the way you played on Saturday. You don't deserve that. We're going to get this thing turned back in the other direction. We've done it.
Don, I do have a question here. This is a question for me, I guess, from Blake. Do they still sell euros off carts on Welch? You're talking about Ames. I don't believe so. The thing down in Campus Town now is the cheesesteak factory. So Philly cheesesteaks, if you're a Philly guy. Anyways, wanted to answer that question from Blake. John asks a question here, Don. And I know we kind of covered this, but he brings up Ohio State, and I think that's a fair point. If you look at Iowa's schedule, if you look at the breakdown in the West and Iowa's goals, if you look at that just for what it is, Iowa still has all of its goals in front of them. I think there's no question. Certainly they can still control the West. They win out. They're going to win the West most likely. I certainly think if they were to win out and then beat Ohio State, you're probably in the playoff. Now, I don't know. That may be far beyond what we should be anticipating, Don, based on what we saw today. But how does Iowa defend if they can't defend one guy in Bell? And certainly Wright is no slouch either. but how do you defend Ohio State's skill position players?
Yeah, honestly, Cory, I don't think there's any reason to even address it right now because we need to we don't need to worry about playing in Indianapolis. We need to be worried about playing well in Madison. Here's a question for you. Does Purdue have 2 losses already in conference?
No, they have 1 loss.
Just one. They lost to Minnesota. That's it?
They lost to Minnesota and they lost to Notre Dame.
Okay, well, talking about having our fate in our own hands, that's not true. If they went out, then they're going to have 1 loss in conference. We've already got 1 loss in conference. They beat us head to head. Right. Now, do I think Purdue's going to win out? Of course not. There's any number of teams they can lose to. But the reality is there are teams we can lose to also. So we just need to, as Coach Fry used to say, we need to stick to our knitting. We don't need to worry about everybody else. We don't need to worry about how we match up against Ohio State because that game is light years away. We don't have to play that game until December. There are so many other things to worry about between now and then.
And Purdue does get Ohio State. That's down the road, but you're absolutely right, Don. Minnesota is now right there in the race as well. So you're right. Iowa has to just worry about improving. This is a good time for a bye week, Don. Am I wrong? I mean,
absolutely right.
Appreciate the call from Scott here earlier. Thank you for calling in. And of course, we look forward to hearing from you again. Hawkeye Howard is here, disappointed in the O-line and the D-line, Don. The D-line to me has taken a step back these last 2 games. What are your thoughts on Phil Parker's guys up front?
Well, I think as these other teams get more and more video of our D linemen, they get a little better handle on how they play, their strengths and weaknesses, their best moves. You need to realize these offensive linemen that are going against our D line, they really study them. They study them as individuals even. And so over time, they realize, here's how this guy likes to pass rush. Here's how somebody else might pass rush in a different way. One might be strictly a finesse rusher off the edge. The other guy's the kind of guy that's going to try to bull rush you. You better have your hips down. You better have your pads down because he's going to try to just take you and run you back into the quarterback. So one is a finesse rusher, the other's not. You need to have an idea, of course, of how each individual plays. And I'm sure as they get more and more video of our guys, even if we're playing 8 D linemen, typically you only have to worry about studying maybe 2 or 3 of them, depending on what position you play. Obviously, if you're playing tackle, it's probably either one defensive end or the other, or of course we do sub. So theoretically, there might be as many as 4 defensive ends you need to study. In the same way with inside players, centers and guards, you got 2 inside defenders that you need to have an idea about, and of course they're 2 backups. So at the most, you need to concentrate on 4 players and just identify how they play differently because they're all different animals. They all have strengths and weaknesses that are maybe different from one player to the next. And just have an awareness of who you're going against. This guy's a finesse player. He's going to try to outrun you. This guy's going to try to run you over. Adjust accordingly.
And Don, Bob makes the comment he thought the O-line would be better by this point. Where would you rate development right now with these tackles, especially with DeYoung and with Richmond, along with the interior that was down Cody Ince? Cody Ince, I don't believe, got a snap today. I believe he was down with an injury. So how would you rate the development of this O-line?
Well, I mentioned a week or 2 ago, from one week to the next, they're becoming smarter players. They're learning from their mistakes. But here's the bad news. It's hard to get bigger, faster, stronger from one week to the next. It doesn't happen. That's the kind of thing that happens from one season to the next. So, we can't change their physical skills much at all. What we can do, of course, is be sure they become smarter players from one week to the next.
Okay. Do have a couple questions here in the chat. Let me find them here. First of all, Don, do want to address something. I want to ask you how you are feeling. I know you didn't go into detail earlier with our listeners, but I know you were in the press box today because of some health-related, I want to call them issues, but how are you feeling, Dad? I don't want to take that for granted.
I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking, Cory. The listeners shouldn't worry about me. I'm planning on living a long time. I'm not there yet, but I'm certainly getting there. And I had I was exposed to a lot of sun in 37 years of coaching, and it's not a shocker to hear that I might have some issues with skin cancer. So I did. I went to see dermatology on Thursday, and the good news is none of it's malignant. So they cut on me. They operated on me as they need to. They didn't dig any deeper than they had to be sure they got all of the bad tissue. And now I'm in recovery phase, and that's why I've got my arms wrapped up, because I got to protect these. You know, I've got about a 3-inch scar on each arm where they've sutured it together, you know, to get rid of that bad tissue. So that's why I asked a favor of Steve Rowe. He was kind enough to allow me to watch the game from the press box, and it did give me a chance to make some notes during the game. On the other hand, I didn't really feel part of the crowd, because you're really isolated from the crowd noise when you set up in the box.
Well, and that is very nice of Steve Rowe and the University of Iowa, but certainly you deserve it, Don. So good to hear that you were able to have that comfortability today. Good compliment here from, I believe, a non-Iowa fan. He says, Coach Patterson, I've been listening to you, impressed with your insight and stats on today's game. Despite a loss, it was great hearing your insight. So good comment there.
It's my pleasure. My wife would tell you that's really all I know is football.
Event Tide makes a comment about the O-line. We're missing guys like Wirfs and Scherf. Well, these guys are young, not to say they can't develop into very fine tackles, but they are young. Now, Don, did you watch the Minnesota-Purdue game? And as you answer this question, I have to dip away for just a second. So I'll leave you this question, and I'll be back in about 30 seconds. Did Minnesota double Purdue, or excuse me, did Minnesota double Bell, or how did they contain him? He did run for or get over 100 yards in that game.
That's a good question. I don't honestly know. I didn't put a lot of time into looking at specifically at the Minnesota-Purdue game. I do know this. The weather was a big factor. It was not a very nice day to play football. Made it more difficult to throw the ball. I think that's one reason you had such a low-scoring game. And it still doesn't surprise me that Bell might end up with 100 yards receiving, even on a poor weather day. I hope they can hear you, Cory, because I can't.
Try it again. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Gotcha.
I'm going to trust that you came up with a very good answer there, but I did not hear it. So, but again, Bell did have, I think, 120 yards. So the guy has been hurt this year. That's one thing people aren't talking about. And he's back healthy now, and man alive. Rockerfella says, props to Karlaftis. He was terrific today. He's one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the Big Ten. Don, what did you see heading into this game from him? Did you foresee a scenario where Iowa would have problems protecting Spencer like they did?
One would answer yes.
Okay.
Our tackles are young players, and of course, Karlaftis is a really experienced edge rusher, and it didn't surprise me at all that he had a big day. The only thing we could do differently maybe is put a tight end over him so that we could double team him with a tight end and a tackle. Of course, you're taking away one of your primary receivers if you use a tight end for that purpose. We like to throw the ball to the tight end. We all understand that. The other possibility, of course, is to put a back over there so at least the back, as he runs his pass route, if he's going to be able to get out into a route, he can at least chip on the guy, slow up his momentum, and make it easier for the tackle to recover against him and still get into the route too. He can wear two hats, if you will. He can help the tackle for a split second and then get into his route. That's another option. I don't know that we did that today. Maybe we did. I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to tell as you watch the game itself without really studying the video.
I like this comment, Don. Coach is renewing Cory's spirit in real time.
I didn't realize that was necessary, Cory. Are you really
well? I'll tell you this.
Demoralized today?
The first hour was a bit rough, Don.
Spencer Petras would say the same thing.
Oh, so Mike, here's a question for you, Don. How do coaches, because I know how fans deal with losses. I mean, does it just completely ruin a coach's weekend when you lose?
Completely ruin? No, because if you've coached very long at all, you realize sometimes there are days, Cory, when you feel like you cannot even put your finger in your eye. You know, there are days when nothing goes right, and there are other days, amazingly enough, where everything goes right. You know, you've seen, if you've coached a long time, you've seen both extremes. So today's game is hard to explain. It's not hard to explain that Purdue might beat us, but you shouldn't you certainly wouldn't expect a decisive 17-point win. That could have been 24, as you mentioned, the goal line play. We got off the hook on that one. But they deserve to win the game. They beat us in just about every way, the only exception being punt returns and kick returns.
Absolutely. Trying to pick my my comments here wisely. Steve says, I have never second-guessed QB play, but what did we have to lose in getting Padilla a chance today? I'll tell you what. I agree with that comment for the last drive. Don, I haven't addressed this yet until now, but I'm glad Steve brought it up. Why is Spencer in the game? Why are our starters in the game when it's 24-7 and there's like a minute to go? Wouldn't that be a good time to get your backup some time?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. I actually, on that particular point in the game, I was actually looking. We had 10 guys on the field already, and I looked for the 11th guy. That was the quarterback, and I was hoping to see Padilla standing next to Brian. It wasn't. It was still Spencer. I knew at that moment Spencer's back in the game, honestly. And, of course, what Brian's hoping for is if we can score one more touchdown, if we can cut it to a 10-point loss, that certainly makes us feel better. It doesn't take the sting out because even the people that are voting would be aware because the game's seen on so many levels. They would know, well, it was really a 17-point game. Iowa scored, with less than a minute on the clock. So as you say, would there be anything wrong with getting Padilla in there and getting some reps? First off, would it be hard to imagine that we might ask him to throw the ball every snap? We're trying to score with a little bit of time left. It would have been a great chance to find out how Padilla might, even though the game's not on the line, at least he's feeling the pressure of them knowing he's got to throw the ball. We're not likely to just run the ball and go home at that point. We're trying to get another touchdown. So I would love to have seen him in that situation. I do understand that the coaches decided, we need to try to gain some momentum into the off week. And if we can score here at the end of the game and cut it to a 10-point loss, that certainly sounds better than 17.
Don, does Iowa win this game if David Bell doesn't play?
If David Bell did not play?
Yes.
Good question. I suspect we'd still lose. And I say that just because Purdue's got other good receivers.
Yeah.
He had a lot of the yardage. He had half the yardage pretty much. But the truth of it is, if you eliminate David Bell's receiving yardage, they still outgained us. I believe. I think they outgained us more than 2-1. Do you have the stats there handy?
Yeah, so total yards for Iowa, 30. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong. Hold on just a second. Total yards for Iowa in this game, 271 and 426 for Purdue. So, and I can pop this up here if we want. 271 total yards for Iowa, and David Bell had 240 yards.
And with all due respect, we got a lot of those yards at the end of the game too.
15 total yards, Don, for Iowa's offense until I think that second to last drive where they started to move the ball a little bit. 15.
You're talking about second half offense?
Second half, excuse me.
15. Yeah, and you were struggling. And again, it's not all on the offense. The defense has to help out. They got to get off the field.
Yeah.
And of course, Purdue makes it difficult for them to achieve their goals because they execute very well, even in long yardage.
Kind comment here from Charles. Sure you appreciate that, Don. Question. Go ahead, Don.
I was just going to mention, I appreciate what Charles says, but just to ease everybody's mind, this cancer is not malignant. I'm going to be fine. I'm planning to live a long time. I'll have a couple of scars on my arms, but that's simply because I got to coach college football for 37 years and probably spent more than just a little too much time in the sun.
Proud scars, right, Don?
That's true.
Okay, Spaghetti Factory says, why doesn't Iowa try more screens to Laporta? He's athletic, hard to tackle. It'd be an easy way to get Laporta easy touches. I will say they seem to run a lot of screens for guys like Fant and Hawkinson. Why not get Laporta more involved in that type of action?
That's a very good question, and Spaghetti Factory is right. You might recall we've run maybe 2 or 3 screens to Laporta. It's been effective because typically he makes the first guy miss. He doesn't make him miss necessarily, but the first guy does not get him on the ground. I'll say it that way. He's not going to juke anybody out of their shoes, but what he will do, he'll still put his foot in the ground and change direction, and you'll get a hand on him, but it's an arm tackle, and an arm tackle is not going to get him on the ground. So I agree. We need to make a better effort to get the ball to Laporta. He was our leading receiver, as I recall. But there are other simpler ways to get in the ball, and the most obvious is something as simple as a screen.
Appreciate this comment from Michael. He says he enjoys our content on YouTube, and Coach Patterson, you're the best. So appreciate that positivity on a day where, man, it is a hard day to stay positive. But we have had some, I will say, there are more positive fans this evening, Don, with our calls. The calls have started to diminish as people, I'm sure, are intrigued by just listening to your insight. But a lot of positive fans tonight. A lot of people saying that, look, this is one game. And I kind of outlined some scenarios, Don, that kind of simplifies things, I know, and you probably don't look at things like this. But, my three options of how to view this loss were, A, it was a fluke, which I don't believe it was a fluke because we've seen Brohm and this team do the same thing to Iowa. Not in this much dominant of a fashion, but they've consistently beaten Iowa. Bell has consistently burned Iowa. So I don't think it's a fluke. The second possibility is that Iowa simply is not as good as we thought. And that may very well be true, but I tend to side with the third option being this is a bad matchup against a coach that, like it or not, probably his favorite team to play is Iowa. And Iowa had a bad day. And also you got to admit, the Riley Moss injury came at the worst possible time, didn't it, Don? I mean, this is the one team you don't want to be down one of your starters at corner.
Well, I hesitate to say that Riley would have performed better than Terry. We don't know that for sure. I'll say this, and I've said it before. I had a lot of confidence based on previous games as to how Terry was going to play.
Yeah.
He would say he did not play nearly well enough. But my only point is David Bell can make a lot of corners look bad. It wasn't just Terry Roberts. It wasn't Hankins either. He would have been able to make number 33 look bad also at times because he's just that good a player. So I think I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on Terry anywhere near all the blame. Could he have played better? Yeah. But he went out there and he competed. He played as well as he can. The players would even tell you there's not much difference in his game and the game of Riley as well.
Well, and I'm more thinking, Don, maybe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but as much as Matt Hankins was struggling to contain Bell, if Riley had been in there, do you think Phil would have switched more things up to try to get more matchups with Riley on David to see if he could make a difference on Bell?
Probably.
Yeah,
Probably so.
That is one thing they didn't have the luxury of doing. I don't know if, they didn't really do that a whole lot. I didn't really see Terry Roberts on Bell all evening. Now, I could be wrong on that. I have to look back at the tape, but
he was some.
Okay.
He was some. I don't know how many balls were targeted at Hankins versus Terry Roberts. I'm not sure, but it looked to me like it was kind of an equal opportunity thing. They went after both of them.
And that's a question from Chase. I didn't watch the Iowa game, but did they even try to switch anything up on guarding Bell? My answer to that question is no, Don. They seem to kind of stick to their game plan and leave Hankins sort of on an island. And the end result was we popped up the number earlier. I'll pop it up again. 11 catches, 240 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah. You saw one time in particular, I think it was a third down. Coach Parker decided to pressure him. And of course, we would never probably go straight man coverage, but on that particular snap, as I recall, it was man free. Sure enough, Bell beats Hankins on a drive route going across the field. And now when he turns up the sideline, he's going to run for 60 yards in that play, gain of 60. And they caught us. Obviously, if you're going to pressure the quarterback, you better get there because the defenders are chasing their guys and they're doing the best to stay with them. But if the protection can buy enough time to the quarterback and the receiver's good, he's gonna win versus any and all corners. And if the ball's accurately thrown, it's going to be a big play. That's exactly what happened.
Steve makes a comment or a question, I should say. Are the two freshman receivers he's talking about, Bruce and Johnson, leading Iowa in receiving yards besides Laporta? That's a good question, Don. You and I had a conversation the other day about how underwhelming Tyrone Tracy has been this season. Charlie Jones is obviously, I thought, played admirably, especially in special teams. As far as offense is concerned, Keegan Johnson, well, he made another big play, yards after catch on the first play of the game. Boy, it felt good one play in. And then, of course, the interception ensued.
Yeah, you're right. That was great to see. Of course, we had 4 receivers on the field. It was a trips formation to the left side. And Keegan was over on the weak side all by himself. Ran a slant. The ball couldn't have been thrown any better. And what's nice about it, he did something after the catch. And for that matter, he got a really killer block from someone coming from the other side of the field. I forget who it was, but it was a blow-up block. And nowadays, of course, you got to worry about getting a flag just because you blindside a guy. So I guess you're supposed to, if the guy is not aware you're about to block him, I guess you're supposed to back off a little bit. So it's not quite such a hard hit. Is that what avoids the flag? It seems ridiculous to me that you can be flagged for a blindside block. I mean, if the defender doesn't see you, whose fault is that? It's the fault of the defender.
Don, I think I'll just say this, and you might disagree with me. I think Seth Benson is very fortunate that he did not get called for targeting and the flag got picked up in the second half, because he gets called for targeting there. He's out for the first half against Wisconsin. And I think it was probably, I don't want to say it was targeting, but I was not convinced that it wasn't on replay. I mean,
yeah, I don't even know if they showed the replay in the stadium. I know when I saw it live, I did not think it was targeting, just because I was pretty confident he did not lead with the crown of his helmet. Maybe he did. I haven't seen the replay.
I think he did.
Thought he
did. They did show the replay. Now maybe you watch it back and disagree with that, but I think he's fortunate, because again, boy, that would be a huge loss.
Now, to my knowledge, Cory, it wasn't even reviewed. I think the white hat simply said no flag. My guess is the flag came from what they call the center. I think they call him the center judge. It's the new official. And let me explain to people. Behind the offense, you have the guy in the white hat. He's the referee. He's in charge. And he sets off to one side. And now they put another official behind the offense, sitting off to the other side. And that center judge, as they call him, I believe, he's got a big capital C on his uniform. His job is primarily just to spot the ball. It seems a little. I believe that's the guy that threw the flag. And of course, the white hat has the right to overrule any and everybody on his crew. Obviously, he would have to say, "I saw it really clearly, and it's not targeting." It appeared that that's what happened. The referee simply said, "No, that was not targeting." And as I know it, the other team has the right to say, maybe they have to burn a timeout. I'm not sure of the procedure nowadays, but at the very least, if you burn a timeout, obviously there's time to review that particular hit.
Question here from Jakob 22, non-Iowa related. Coach Patterson, do you try to make it to an Army game every year, perhaps the Army-Navy game?
Great question. You'll find this interesting. All these years, in 37 years of coaching, I never saw Army-Navy because I was always working. And even if it is in December, it's always going to conflict with recruiting weekends that time of the year. That's assuming you're not playing a game yourself. And they try to schedule Army-Navy, so it's pretty much after all the regular season. It's typically, maybe it's the last regular season game of the season. But here's the rest of the story. Now I'm retired, and I'm not going to bother to go Army-Navy this year because, as you know, I have some commitments in terms of broadcasting, too, for the Missouri Valley to work those games. But I do know this. My first year, my senior year in college, was the fall of 72, or specifically for Army-Navy, December of 72. So I've already told Lisa, we're going to be watching Army-Navy next year, 2022. It'll be the 50th anniversary of my last Army-Navy game. And it's something to see. It really is. It'll make you feel proud as an American to see the entire Corps of cadets on the field at one time. You're talking over 4,000 cadets all marching in. And I might add this, marching a lot more effectively than Navy does. Navy doesn't march with the same precision as Army. That's not surprised because we've always been better with drill and ceremony than the Naval Academy anyway. They do okay. And right now, Army's playing better football than Navy too. So I'd like to think Army's going to get another win this year. I have not seen an Army-Navy game now in 48 years, I should say. But I'm certainly planning on, and Lisa's planning on seeing one next December, I should say.
Update here from D-Rock Irish. Wisconsin leading Army 13-0 second quarter. So any thoughts?
I got a quick comment about that. I would still bet, even though they're only in the second quarter, Wisconsin will finish the game very likely with a win, of course, although that's not guaranteed. Army's a competitive football team. But at the very least, even if Wisconsin wins, I would be willing to predict they will have some lower leg injuries as a result of the game. And that's because of the wishbone offense. I should say the triple option offense, not wishbone, triple option offense. And, of course, those Army blockers are maybe undersized compared to a few of Wisconsin's defensive players. But I guarantee you they're very well taught how to chop block people, I shouldn't say chop block because that suggests a foul. How to simply block a guy low and hard and with pretty good effectiveness be able to knock him off his feet. Those Army blockers are pretty good at that. So I would imagine by the end of the game, there'll be some lower leg problems on the part of Wisconsin's defense.
All right, Don. Let's kind of turn the table at least a bit here. Iowa, of course, now moving to a bye week and a situation where you do have to flush this. Obviously, as you mentioned, there's going to be some dissecting of the tape that needs to be done. What is your outlook here? I know there's a gap here because we do have a bye week before the Wisconsin game. How confident are you with this team heading to Madison, given what we saw this evening?
Well, I think it's safe to say some players have had their confidence shaken. They had a really high level of confidence with how they could play, and that confidence has been shaken today for some players, not all, for some. So they got to regain their mojo, so to speak. And it's not just an individual issue. The player himself doesn't have to do it because those position coaches are committed to finding a way to help them get it done. So we simply have to remind guys that they're better players than what they showed today as a group. If we played Purdue 10 times, maybe they would beat us 5 times. I don't doubt that because they certainly have an idea of how to play us, how to attack us. But it would be easy for me to say they might beat us 5 times, but we might beat them 5 times too. Maybe it is a coin toss game. The way they played us, I guess the best we could hope for is to declare it as a toss-up. But the bottom line, they have a better idea of how to play us than other teams. I give Brohm more credit than the average head coach. And for that matter, give his staff credit for being above average with their game planning. The bad news, of course, is now other teams have other ideas. I won't say better ideas, but they have other ideas of how to attack us now because they watched Purdue being successful at what they did. Now, that doesn't mean that Northwestern can accomplish the same things with their passing game. I don't think they can. But obviously, you might pick up a good idea or two from that Purdue game. And that's something that's another reason we have to correct our mistakes on both sides of the ball. We have to realize if Purdue hurt us with a particular route combination, then we know, my gosh, is it hard to imagine we might see it again? Maybe even in 2 weeks against Wisconsin. So we better be ready for it. And we need to make people beat us in a left-handed sort of way. Don't make it easy for them. Make it difficult for them. Sometimes extreme situations call for extreme measures. So let's do something. Let's think outside the box a little bit. Let's figure out a way to play that maybe forces them to be uncomfortable. Today, the uncomfortable team clearly was us. We need to find ways to make them uncomfortable. And that applies to Wisconsin, of course, as the next opponent.
And Don, of course, I'm not watching the Army game. I'll probably flip it on here when we're done. But we saw them rack up a lot of yards in the ground last week against Illinois. I don't want to call it their coming out party because, again, this is against a subpar Illinois squad. But you would have to think that they are going to be locked and loaded, ready to run down Iowa's throat as they always do, with a sense of renewed confidence, especially if they're able to get it done against a very aggressive Army team today. So that game is in 2 weeks, 11 a.m. Central Time. So to let everybody know, I want to handle a few housekeeping matters before we leave. For all of our followers, all of our listeners here at Iowa, the voice of college football, Don will be with us the day after the Iowa-Wisconsin game. So we will be here for Iowa postgame after the Wisconsin game. So myself taking your calls, your chats, your comments after the 11 a.m. game 2 weeks from today. All right. The day following, Don will join us for a special Sunday edition of Iowa postgame. So we'll be there after the game, after the Wisconsin game, but we'll also be there the Sunday after. And that's because, Don, you are heading back to your one of your, I don't know how to, not your alma mater, but certainly where your heart is at Western Illinois for, I believe, Illinois State, Western Illinois, correct?
Right. On the 30th, we'll be over in Macomb. We've always made an effort. We've done it. We've actually gotten back, at least since we've been back in the Midwest, we've gotten back for one game every year. It turns out, of course, I'm interested in making all the Iowa games and got commitments to do broadcasting elsewhere. So the only date that worked for us as far as a home game in Macomb was the 30th. So as you mentioned, I will not be available. Here's a question about next weekend. Who does Wisconsin play next weekend? I'm hoping they have a game.
They play Purdue.
Purdue. That's interesting. That'll be very interesting. That's good to know. So we'll see how that plays out. Do they have to go to Camp Randall, I wonder?
I believe they're in West Lafayette. Let me double check that. Yeah, they are in West Lafayette. No time yet set for that game.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting because based on today, is it hard to imagine that Purdue might be good enough to beat Wisconsin? That's not much of a leap of faith in my mind.
No.
They're very capable of beating anybody in the West. So it'll be interesting to see how Purdue's season finishes out. And as I've already mentioned, they've only got one loss in the West. Well, truthfully, if we win out, we're still not guaranteed to represent the West because if Purdue wins out, they represent over us. We shouldn't worry about it, of course. We just need to focus on the next game. That's all.
Right. So we will be here again the day of the Iowa-Wisconsin game, and Don will join us on the 31st. It would be November 1st, Don, that Sunday evening, and we have not set a time yet for that, but of course we'll keep you posted here at Iowa, the Voice of College Football. And then this coming Sunday, Don, during the bye week, I believe we are doing a special bye week edition of the show on Sunday evening. Don, are we still good for that?
Yes. I will be doing Northern Iowa at South Dakota State this next Saturday, and we'll be traveling. Of course, we won't be back until Sunday afternoon. And is it 7 o'clock, Cory? Is that what you've decided, or what time?
7 o'clock works for you. It works for me as well, and I'm sure our listeners, that's a good time of day on a Sunday.
So we're talking about next Sunday on the 24th, I believe it is, at 7 o'clock, and the following Sunday on November 1st. So I hope the listeners can keep that straight. The next two visits we'll have on the air would be each of the next two Sundays at 7 p.m.
Absolutely. And I am writing this out here so that everybody can have this in their mind. So, yeah, again, the 24th at 7 p.m. And then, of course, the 31st, or excuse me, I keep saying the 31st. There are 30 days in the month of October, Don. I'm pretty certain on that. So, again, the 11/1, that'd be November 1st at 7 p.m. Again, both of those are Sundays, and we will be here live taking your calls, your questions. So I'll pop that up here so everybody can see it. Again, we'll be here the 24th at 7 p.m. Sunday, and then on 11/1, November 1st, a Sunday at 7 p.m. as well. But, of course, we'll be here after the Wisconsin game for Iowa postgame. Couple other things before we leave. Wanted to toss this out here for everybody. I did mention this during our live show with Mark Rogers earlier this week. If you're enjoying our show, if you're enjoying Iowa postgame at the Voice of College Football, and, of course, our live shows that we do throughout the week and any other coverage, really, that we put together, want to get a feeler for interest in an Iowa basketball live postgame this coming season. So, of course, the Iowa basketball season starts in less than a month. Don will not be our analyst for that, but we certainly would like to gauge the interest in having an Iowa post-game show. Of course, it will not be on this channel because it's a football channel. It would be over on our channel, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. But if you are interested in a live basketball post-game show for Iowa Hoops, please let us know. Comment on a video. Let us know in the live chat. You can also contact us through our website, storycounty.news/Hawkeye of the Storm. But wanted to put that out there as well. Also wanted to put a plug in real quickly. I don't promote enough, so I want to make sure I do this. There are live shows. We do Iowa live shows starting this Tuesday, actually, 4:30 p.m. Myself, Mark Rogers. We will be there to break down everything Iowa, including this game and the bye week ahead. So each Tuesday, have it locked right here to Iowa football, the Voice of College Football, 4:30 p.m. Central Time for a live edition of our show. And, of course, if you're interested in donating to the Voice of College Football, you can go to the comment section below. Please make a note that it's for the Iowa channel to help us continue to do what we're doing. And, of course, you see in the bottom of the screen there, you can listen to our podcast through Spotify, Apple, Google, and more. That's From the Hawkeye of the Storm. From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Don, I feel like I just put together a series of ads there. I apologize for that. Anything else you want to add about this game, where Iowa fans' heads should be heading into a bye week? I mean, it's not the way you want to enter a bye week, Don, but certainly a good time for it. Anything else you want to add?
Well, if Coach Fry were here, he would remind everybody. He said, right now you might wonder, but I'm here to tell you, the sun is still going to come up tomorrow morning. We're going to survive this. It's disappointing, that's for sure, but we're not going to let it define who we are. It's really important when you have a disappointing loss that you make sure it only counts as one. So we do have to put it behind us, but only after we've learned from it. And at that point, we will flush it from our system and we'll put our focus on Wisconsin, because that's the next one that matters.
And I guess I was wrong, Don. There are 31 days in October. I guess I didn't learn that as a as a school kid. There are 31 days in October.
I still remember now. 30 days has September, April, June, and November, right?
All right. That's sort of embarrassing. So let's update that. I appreciate Hawkeye Howard letting me know. All right. Here's the updated schedule: the 24th and the 31st, 7 p.m. Don, as always, appreciate the time this evening. I know it wasn't under the best circumstances, but it's 1 week. We'll move on and we'll live to see another day, and we'll enjoy talking to you next Sunday at 7 p.m.
I look forward to it also, Cory.
All right, for Don Patterson, I'm Cory Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm and Iowa football at the Voice of College Football. We will talk to you soon.